She was 8 months pregnant when they closed the gate on her. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something. What you're about to hear isn't just another story about injustice. This is about what happens when a single machine, sitting quietly in a corner, records something that destroys everyone who touches it. This is about the moment when the camera becomes judge, jury, and executioner. And if you think you know where this is going, you don't. Hit that like button right now, subscribe, and drop a comment saying I'm ready, because what comes next will change how you see every security camera you pass. Let's begin. The marble floor gleamed under her feet. Air-conditioned air washed over the visitors in their expensive jackets. Somewhere inside the house, a crystal chandelier stirred dust into a slow, harmless glitter. Aisha stood at the edge of that fortress, hands clenched around a battered plastic bag containing the few things she had brought to work that morning. A spare cloth, soap, a boiled egg from the market. Her cotton dress hid the curve of her belly like a small defiance. Around her, the household staff had gathered in a loose circle, their faces showing shock and cold calculation. Beyond them, the driver's gate waited to swallow her into the sun and the city and the rest of the world. "Take her out," said Mr. Olumide. The sentence landed like a verdict. He said it without shouting. He had a way of turning volume into violence. Calm, measured, the kind of voice that made people who worked for him shrink as if the echo could bruise. He stood by the entrance to the hall, the picture of a man who had never been refused anything he wanted. His shirts were always freshly pressed, his cufflinks quiet and deliberate. Today, his face was a flat stone. "You know the rules," Amaka said, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. Amaka ran the day-to-day operations of the household with practiced cruelty. She had never forgiven what she called the boss's soft spots. She hated Aisha the way someone hates a storm for the chaos it promised. "You stole from the family. There is no excuse, not for a cleaner." Aisha's mouth opened. No words came at first. The security guard, Kola, reached for her arm, gentle at first, then firmer when her knees nearly buckled. She thought of the tiny life inside her, of the way it kicked late at night as she hummed tired prayers. She thought of the rent she still owed the landlord, of the clinic bill from Mama Grace's coughing. She thought of her son Musa, with his serious eyes and shirt too big for his ribs, who would come running when the gate clicked and there was no one on the other side. "Please," she said at last, soft as a confession. "Please, sir, I didn't do anything." "Enough," Mr. Olumide said. He turned away as if her voice were a scent in the air he wished to avoid. "Take her bag. Take her home." They marched her down the driveway under a sun that made the marble glare like an accusation. A guest in sunglasses pretended not to see. The gardener kept his eyes fixed on the hedges. The house had a way of protecting itself. Servility as defense, indifference as armor. When the gate shut behind her, Aisha felt more than the physical cold of being excluded. She felt a humiliation that scraped its name across her belly and through to the baby. Let me tell you about Aisha's life before this moment. She woke up at 3:30 every morning, every single morning. She took 2 buses to get to Madison Tower because she couldn't afford the subway pass. She arrived at 4:45, changed into her uniform in the basement bathroom, and started her shift at exactly 5 a.m. She had a system. First, emptying all the trash bins on the 47th floor, 42 bins total. Then vacuum, starting from the east wing, moving west. Then clean the bathrooms with bleach so strong it made her nauseous, especially now that she was pregnant. Then wipe down every desk, every surface, careful not to move any papers, any personal items. Invisible means don't leave a trace that you were ever there. By 9 a.m., she was done. The lawyers started arriving. They walked past her without seeing her. She took the service elevator down, clocked out, and headed to her second job at a diner in Queens. She worked there until 6 p.m., got home at 7:30, ate something cheap, rice and beans usually. Fell asleep by 8:30, woke up at 3:30 and did it all over again. This had been her life for 2 years. No breaks, no sick days, no complaints. Because Aisha had a goal. She was saving $37,000 to have her baby in a decent hospital, to take 3 months off work, to give her child a chance she never had. Now, let me tell you about the man who just destroyed her life. Mr. Olumide wakes up at 7 a.m. in his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. His wife Catherine is usually already gone, at the gym or having breakfast with her book club friends. Olumide showers, puts on a suit that costs more than Aisha makes in 3 months, and his driver takes him to the office. He arrives at 9:30, never earlier. He has people to do the early work. He's the founding partner. He built his firm from nothing 20 years ago. Now it's worth $400 million. He handles corporate law, mergers, acquisitions, the kind of cases that make headlines. He's respected, he's feared, he's untouchable. Or so he thought. Here's what you need to understand about what happened that morning. Aisha had been cleaning the guest rooms when someone noticed a bracelet missing. An old family bangle, gone from the dressing table. Amaka said the only cleaner present had the opportunity. The mistress's sister, visiting from abroad and wearing clothes Aisha had never seen outside of movies, stopped her in the hallway and accused her with a look like a pointed finger. Aisha tried to explain. She hadn't touched anything. She couldn't have. Her hands had always been clean at work. That was part of her pride. She left things better than she found them. She only wanted to finish, earn her pay, and go home. But in houses like this, accusations don't need proof. They need certainty. And the certainty of the powerful always weighs more than the truth of the powerless. That night, in her single-room apartment, Aisha sat on the floor and pressed her hand to her stomach, feeling for the small movements people call kicks. Her neighbor Sade brought over a plate and sat with her on the mat. They ate with the kind of silence that has its own language. Finally, Sade asked what happened. Aisha told the story like reading minutes from a meeting she never wanted to be part of. A bracelet was missing. Amaka accused her. The mistress's sister confirmed the suspicion. No investigation, no questions. Just the gate closing behind her. "We will find something," Sade said, and Aisha understood the kindness beneath the sentence. That talk could be a weapon or a salve. That community rotated fortunes as much as money ever could. But the firing hung between them like a finality. The landlord had a notice pinned in the stairwell about rent arrears. Mama Grace coughed in the next room, and the sound underlined how small a person's options could be when sickness and rent had the same due date. Across the city, in the white cube of his study, Mr. Olumide sat with a cup of tea gone cold. He ran his thumb across the paperweights on his desk. He thought about image and the economy of shame. To him, a missing bangle wasn't merely a missing object. It was a crack in the glass that sheltered his family from the world. He was not a cruel man by instinct. He had been a boy who believed in the soundness of rules. But stories sometimes betray their authors. "Nothing must be leaked," he told Amaka over the phone. "This cannot become gossip." "Why would it be gossip, sir?" she had asked, with a flavor of surprise that was nothing like surprise. "We took care of it." He wanted to believe her. He wanted desperately to close the door and feel safe again. But when he asked Kola to review the CCTV footage, what he thought would be an exonerating snapshot turned into a question with teeth. Kola had been at the gate when Aisha left. He had the nervous, watchful face of a man who had seen too many of life's small indignities and learned to keep count. Who came at what hour? Who carried what? Which visits held secrets beneath polite gestures? That night, he sat at his little post, flicking between a dozen tiny screens, the hum of his monitor like a second pulse. He didn't want trouble.
He wanted a steady wage and the ability to send his eldest to senior secondary school next year. He watched the frames as instructed, but something about the timestamp caught in his throat. Tunde was the man who actually managed the CCTV recordings in the back room. He was quieter than Kola. He liked machines because machines didn't gossip. They recorded.
They didn't choose sides. He kept the files labeled for housekeeping and any necessary review. He had seen Aisha at work before, light-footed, thorough. He had also seen things that didn't belong to him, late-night visitors, a guest who drifted through the corridor with someone who wasn't family. He didn't tell anyone. He had bills. He knew silence, but he also had a moral twitch he couldn't ignore. So when the formal complaint arrived, loss of a family heirloom, please review footage, Tunde loaded it into the system and watched the hours on spool. It looked mundane at first. Slippers, corridors, the slow orbit of servants doing the small rituals of a rich house. Then a shadow moved in the wrong way. A figure in a long dress paused at the dressing table. Aisha. But the record didn't end there. It showed Aisha doing something that made Tunde's knuckles go white. Not theft. Her hands were hurriedly returning something to the wardrobe. Aisha's face in the grainy gray light looked tired and apologetic, not guilty. Tunde sat back and pressed his temple. The tape didn't match the accusation. His sense of the world grew complicated. He knew he should report what the footage actually showed. He also knew how quickly a household could turn on a scapegoat. So he made a copy. A small thumb drive that wouldn't leave his pocket. He thought of the images as a talisman of truth. But truth, as he would learn, has consequences that can't be controlled. Meanwhile, rumors did what they always do in the city. They hurried along their own course, indifferent to truth. Amaka began to stitch a story from small facts and the willingness of others to believe them. She spoke in fragments at first. Complaints about the missing bangle, the way the cleaner had looked slightly too comfortable near certain personal items. Her voice was corrosive because it had been dry for so long. The firing was swift, and swift things often smell like fear. Mr. Olumide told himself afterward that he had acted to protect the family. He hadn't wanted a scandal. He hadn't wanted guests to whisper and associates to look sideways. Any stain on the spotless had to be removed immediately, or the whole house might suffer. His business dealings, his invitations, the comfortable arc of his life. Aisha went home in the heat and the dust. On her way, a group of boys selling fried plantain called out. Someone hissed that she should be ashamed. She wanted to answer, to shout that she hadn't stolen anything, that she had a child and a life too. But she clutched her plastic bag and kept walking because the cost of being louder felt too high. That night she slept badly. She dreamed of the gate, of the marble, of a million fingers pointing at a body that wasn't only hers, but also a future. She woke to the city already in motion. The dismissal made its rounds through the neighborhood by the next morning. By noon, she had a paper stuck in the stairwell. Cleaner dismissed for theft. The landlord knocked in the evening asking for last month's rent. The clinic called to remind her of the midwife appointment she had missed. But here's what Aisha didn't know. Here's what no one knew yet. 3 days before she was fired, something happened that would change everything. It was a Tuesday morning, 5:47 a.m. She was cleaning Mr. Olumide's office, wiping down his desk, when she noticed his computer was still on. That was unusual. Olumide always shut down his computer. She was about to turn it off when she saw a document open on the screen. The header said, Wellington, Personal Assets, Offshore Accounts. Aisha froze. She wasn't naive. She knew what offshore accounts meant. She was about to close the document when she noticed something else. A USB drive, small and black, wedged behind the computer monitor. It had fallen there, probably knocked off the desk accidentally. She picked it up, turned it over in her hand. It was unlabeled. She should have left it there, should have walked away. But curiosity made her pocket it. She told herself she'd give it to Olumide later, tell him she found it. That night, in her small apartment, Aisha plugged the USB drive into her old laptop. What she found made her blood run cold. The drive contained copies of emails, bank statements, legal documents, all meticulously organized. Someone had been stealing confidential client information from the firm for months. Someone with access to Olumide's personal files. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And that person's name was on every folder. Catherine Wellington, Olumide's wife. Aisha sat there for hours reading through the files. Catherine had been systematically stealing information about Olumide's wealthiest clients, their assets, their legal vulnerabilities, their secrets. She was building a case, not for law enforcement, but for herself. Aisha found emails between Catherine and a divorce attorney. Catherine was planning to divorce Olumide and take everything. But she needed leverage. She needed to prove that his wealth was built on unethical practices, that his clients were criminals, that his firm was corrupt. She was going to destroy him publicly, take his money, and walk away clean. But why? Aisha couldn't understand. Catherine had everything: money, status, a beautiful life. Why risk it all? Then Aisha found another folder. This one was labeled Sophia. Inside were private investigation reports, photos, bank records. Catherine had hired a private investigator 3 years ago when she suspected Olumide was having an affair. The investigator found everything: photos of Olumide with a woman named Sophia, hotel receipts, text messages, and then a hospital record showing Sophia had been pregnant. Catherine knew everything. She had known for 3 years and said nothing. She waited, planned, and now she was ready to strike. Aisha felt sick, not because of Catherine's betrayal, but because she realized something horrible. If Catherine knew about Sophia, and if Catherine had been watching Olumide's office, then Catherine might eventually connect dots. And if Catherine was willing to destroy Olumide, what would she do to anyone who got in her way? Aisha made a decision that night. She would give the USB drive to Olumide. She would warn him. She would tell him everything. Not because she wanted anything in return, but because, despite everything, some part of her believed people deserved to know the truth before their lives imploded. December 19th arrived. Aisha went to work as usual, the USB drive hidden in her uniform pocket. She planned to leave it on Olumide's desk with a note. Anonymous. Simple. But when she arrived at the office at 5 a.m., something was wrong. The door to Olumide's office was open. The lights were on. Someone was inside. Aisha froze in the hallway. She heard movement, drawers opening, papers rustling. She peeked around the corner and saw her, Catherine Wellington, dressed in black, gloves on, rifling through Olumide's desk with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. Aisha's heart pounded. She stepped back, trying to move quietly, but her foot knocked against a trash bin. The sound echoed in the empty hallway. Catherine's head snapped up. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither woman moved. Then Catherine smiled. It was the coldest smile Aisha had ever seen. "You," Catherine said softly. "I was wondering when we'd finally meet properly." Aisha couldn't speak, couldn't move. Catherine walked toward her slowly, deliberately. "You think I don't know who you are? You think I don't watch everyone who comes into this building?" Aisha's mind raced. "I don't want any trouble. I'm just here to work." Catherine laughed, a bitter sound. "Just here to work? How convenient." She stepped closer. "What's in your pocket?" "Nothing. It's nothing." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "Show me." "No. Show me, or I'll call security right now and tell them you're stealing from the office." Aisha had no choice. She pulled out the USB drive. Catherine's expression changed from anger to shock, to something else. Fear. "Where did you get that?"
I found it, behind the computer. I was going to give it back. Catherine lunged forward and grabbed Aisha's wrist, trying to snatch the drive. Aisha pulled back and they struggled. Aisha was pregnant, off balance. Catherine was stronger, more desperate. They fell against the wall and Aisha cried out as pain shot through her belly. Catherine grabbed the USB drive and shoved Aisha hard. Aisha stumbled backward, hit the floor, clutching her stomach. "You shouldn't have come here," Catherine hissed. "You should have stayed invisible." She turned and walked away, quickly, disappearing down the hallway. Aisha lay there, tears streaming down her face, terrified for her baby. She tried to stand, but the pain was too intense. She called out for help, but no one was there. The floor was empty.
She managed to crawl to the elevator, press the button, and collapse inside. Hours later, Aisha woke up in a hospital bed. A nurse told her she'd been brought in by paramedics, found unconscious in the building's lobby. Her baby was okay. Bruised ribs, minor injuries, but the baby was okay. Aisha cried with relief. Then the door opened and 2 security guards walked in with a police officer. They asked her what happened. She tried to explain, but her words came out jumbled. She mentioned Catherine, the USB drive, the struggle. They took notes, but their expressions were skeptical. Then Richard Olamide arrived. He looked furious, not concerned. He didn't ask if she was okay. He asked if she stole files from his office. Aisha tried to explain, tried to tell him about Catherine, about the offshore accounts, about everything. But Olamide cut her off. He told the police she'd been caught on security footage entering his office unauthorized, going through his desk. He said she was being terminated and he wanted her arrested for theft. Aisha couldn't believe it. "Mr. Olamide, please, listen to me. Your wife, she's the one who—" "My wife told me what happened," Olamide said coldly. "She came to the office early to drop off papers and found you in my office stealing. She confronted you, you attacked her, and you fell trying to run away." "That's a lie. She's the one who attacked me. She took the USB drive. She's been stealing from you for months." "Enough." Olamide tried to the police. "I want her charged. I want her out of my building, out of my life. She's unstable, she's dangerous." The police didn't arrest her, not enough evidence yet, but they escorted her out of the hospital. Olamide had security ban her from the building. Her cleaning company fired her immediately. Aisha was homeless within a week. Her savings gone on hospital bills, her reputation destroyed. No one would hire a pregnant woman accused of theft. She ended up in a shelter, broken, defeated, wondering how her life had fallen apart so completely. But Richard Olamide couldn't sleep. 3 days after firing Aisha, he lay in bed next to Catherine, staring at the ceiling. Something about Aisha's story bothered him. He'd seen genuine fear in her eyes, not guilt. And Catherine's version of events felt too neat, too convenient. He replayed the moment over and over, Aisha screaming something as security dragged her out. What had she been trying to say? On the 4th night, Olamide couldn't take it anymore. He went to his office at 2 a.m., alone. He logged into the security system and pulled up the footage from December 19th. He started at 5 a.m., watched Aisha clock in, take the elevator up, start her routine. Normal. Then he fast-forwarded to 5:30. He watched Aisha approach his office. The door was already open, lights already on. His heart started pounding. He watched Aisha peek inside. He watched Catherine going through his desk. He watched their confrontation. He watched Catherine grab Aisha's wrist. He watched them struggle. He watched Catherine shove Aisha hard, and Aisha hit the floor. He watched Catherine take something from Aisha's hand, a USB drive. He watched Catherine leave quickly, stepping over Aisha without helping her. Olumide sat there in shock. Catherine had lied about everything. Aisha was telling the truth. But why? Why would Catherine do this? He kept watching the footage, rewinding, looking for answers. Then he noticed something else. He went back through weeks of footage, then months, and there she was, Catherine, coming to the office late at night, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week when she thought no one was watching, using her key access, going through his files, copying documents. She'd been doing this for over a year. Olumide felt his world crumbling. His wife, his partner, the woman he'd trusted with everything. She'd been systematically destroying him. He went to his computer and started searching. He checked his personal files, his bank accounts, his client information. Then he found it. The offshore accounts document Aisha had mentioned. It was still open on his computer. He read through it and his blood ran cold. Catherine had been embezzling from his firm. Small amounts at first, then larger. Over 3 years, she'd stolen $4.2 million and hidden it in offshore accounts under shell companies. She was planning to divorce him, claim half of everything legally, and walk away with millions she'd already stolen. Olumide made a decision. He had to find Aisha. He had to know the truth. He searched for her for 2 days, called shelters, hospitals, asked around the neighborhood where she used to live. Finally, someone told him about a women's shelter in the Bronx. He drove there at midnight, walked in, asked for Aisha Santos. They brought her to a small meeting room. She looked exhausted, her eyes hollow, her pregnant belly pressed against a worn sweater. When she saw Olumide, she didn't react, didn't cry, didn't yell. She just looked at him with a strange, sad calm. Olumide sat across from her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Olumide said, "I saw the footage, all of it. I know what happened." Aisha nodded slowly. "Do you believe me now?" "Yes, and I need you to tell me everything." So Aisha told him. She told him about finding the USB drive, about discovering Catherine's plan, about trying to warn him. She told him about the confrontation, the struggle, Catherine's threats. She told him everything. When she finished, Olumide asked, "Why didn't you just throw the drive away? Why did you try to help me?" Aisha looked at him. "Because I've been where you are, betrayed by someone you trusted, and I know what it feels like when no one believes you. Not even you." Over the next 2 weeks, Olumide worked with forensic accountants and federal investigators. They built a case against Catherine using the information from the USB drive and additional evidence they uncovered. Catherine was arrested on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and obstruction of justice. She denied everything at first, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her attorney negotiated a plea deal. She would serve 6 years in federal prison, forfeit all stolen assets, and agree to a divorce with no settlement. Now here's where the story gets interesting. Remember Tunde, the man who managed the CCTV footage? He'd made a copy of everything, and he'd been watching. When he saw what happened to Aisha, when he saw how the powerful had closed ranks to protect themselves, he made a choice. He sent the footage to a local news outlet called the City Ledger, a small but growing platform that covered stories bigger newsrooms sometimes ignored. The morning the clip leaked, the city woke to the sound of people saying the same thing in different mouths. Aisha was at the clinic for a checkup when a woman in the waiting room nudged her and whispered, "Have you seen it?" Her phone glowed with a looping image. A corridor. A man in a dark suit stepping into a guest room. The grainy black and white showed Catherine going through Olumide's desk. Then it showed the confrontation with Aisha, the struggle. Catherine shoving Aisha to the ground. Catherine taking the USB drive. Catherine walking away without helping. The caption beneath it said, "Cleaner dismissed. CCTV tells another story." The post had come from the City Ledger. Its headline asked a question, and people were hungry for an answer. Aisha felt the room tilt. The midwife guided her to a chair. "Sit. Breathe. Don't watch," the midwife said gently. But Aisha watched because she couldn't not watch. Seeing that frame brought with it a new kind of reckoning.
The humiliation of the gate was still a bruise in her ribs, but beyond that was a strange lightness. The short, impartial eye of the camera had not been bought or threatened. It had recorded what it recorded, that was all. But what it recorded splintered the tidy narrative that had destroyed her life. By mid-morning, the footage had gone viral. It was shared and reshared with hot takes attached. Speculation about motive, names, the whisper of blackmail and scandal. The City Ledger added a short piece that quoted neighbors, housekeeping workers, and a legal advocate who said investigators should take the tape seriously. The comments section turned ugly at times, but many readers expressed unease at the thought of a woman losing everything on the basis of a rumor. The conversation had shifted. What had been an accusation now had a counter-image. The direction of sympathy began to bend. Inside the mansion, things moved with cruel speed. Olumide's phone wouldn't stop ringing. The first call was from a partner who wanted to postpone a meeting. "We should avoid public exposure until we know the facts," the partner said.
In that sentence lived a polite withdrawal. The second call was from a committee chair who suggested cooling off public-facing events. The third call came from a friend who had seen the clip and asked whether the House was handling this appropriately. Public hunger turned from curiosity into a kind of moral appetite. People began to talk about the structural ways in which power shaped belief. Commentators wrote op-eds about employers and workers, about the fragility of reputational capital when weighed against recorded truth. The story spilled into radio, into coffee shop conversations, into barber shops where men repeated the clips and joked and then fell quiet when they saw the effect on families. Olumide attempted to put the genie back in the bottle. He sought to have hosting sites remove content citing privacy. He wrote letters, sent legal threats. Some outlets took down photos. Others kept content up and argued public interest outweighed privacy. The mansion's lawyers contacted partners, clients, and charity boards to explain. The explanations were technical, full of legalese that draped around human harm like a cold comforter. Aisha's vindication, when it arrived in full, was uneven. A formal review at the household found that the footage undermined the initial accusation. The House issued an apology, posted to social channels with the same measured tone of the earlier denials. Careful, not quite human. They paid a small compensation. The legal aid advised Aisha on the offer. She accepted the money. Part of it paid for a midwife appointment. Part of it paid the landlord. It didn't buy dignity back, but it bought time. For Olumide, the damage was slower and subtler. His public image had been fractured. Boards asked for explanations. Patrons withdrew. Some people called for a formal inquiry into the mansion's operations and the ways privilege had shielded some while sidelining others. The man who had believed his life was an accumulation of tidy choices now faced days where the front page and the household's quiet judgments mattered more than his ledger. He tried to reconstruct himself, but reconstruction is not the same as innocence reinstated. The footage hadn't convicted him of a specific crime in court, but it had shifted the way people regarded him. He learned in a slow and private way what it meant to be undone by what a machine had recorded. He felt the loneliness of reputation stripped. Friends who had once laughed in his living room invited lesser intimates into their circles. In the place where he had once felt secure, there now lived an ache that money could not soothe. Weeks after the storm, Aisha stood in front of a small clinic with Sade beside her. The air was hot and bright. She felt under her dress the steady presence of the life inside, a presence that had been the axis of her decisions. She thought often now about the ironies of vindication, the relief of being believed, and the sorrow that it had cost others so much. She didn't want to be bitter. She wanted to be practical. She planned quietly to enroll in a small sewing class, to save for things that mattered. She wanted work she could keep. She wanted the kind of dignity that comes from steady wages and hands not forced to plead. Months later, a small piece ran in the City Ledger about Aisha, this time a quieter profile, about a woman who had been dismissed, vindicated, and now was learning to rebuild. The piece focused not on scandal, but on resilience, small savings, a sewing class, late-night conversations with Sade and Mama Grace. The profile's final lines were not triumphant. They simply noted that dignity had been restored in one register, though other losses remained. When asked by a neighbor how it felt, vindicated but not exactly relieved, Aisha replied with a phrase that would sit in the air like a single small truth. "I didn't want the camera to save me. I wanted to be seen." She smiled then, a smile small and honest, the kind that knows grief but refuses to be owned by it. The mansion continued to host guests and dinner parties. The chandelier still made dust glitter, and guests still sipped tea and discussed business. But the household moved differently. It had been forced to reckon with the fact that authority untempered becomes fragile, not strong. Cameras, small blinking eyes in the corners of rooms, would now be read not only as instruments of surveillance, but as custodians of memory. In the end, the thing that destroyed one life was not the camera itself, but the choices that the camera recorded. The unblinking footage had performed a kind of impartial justice. It did not glorify, it did not judge beyond the simple fact of what it had seen. The public, the staff, the family, those who had power and those who did not, were left to interpret the frames in the light of their own consciences. What remained when the cameras stopped flickering on news feeds was a quieter moral. That modern witnesses, the tiny lenses tucked into corners, do not by themselves create justice, but they are capable of exposing mismatches between story and fact. And sometimes, exposure forces a reckoning neither neat nor merciful. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think about power, about dignity, about what it means to be seen, leave a comment below. Tell us, what would you do if you found footage that changed everything? Hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this, they don't just entertain. They remind us that the people we ignore today might be the ones who save us tomorrow. Thank you for listening.